Hey there, YouTube. Welcome back to Atlantic City. Today, I'd like to talk to you about William S. Burroughs. Often referred to as junkie author. I think he was an awful lot more than that. And a guy who, oddly enough, I never read his books, but I read his autobiography, his biography. A guy who was involved in the beat movement of the 50s, and who stayed out in front in the world of the arts and literature for his whole life. I think he lived into his mid-80s. Geez, I wish I could... Well, he's one of the most interesting people that has probably lived in the last century. He was born in St. Louis to a wealthy and sort of a family that was involved in the upper crust circuit of St. Louis. And I don't think he was ever in place there. I don't know exactly. He left home at a rather young age, and was supported slightly, but his family would send him a stipend every month. And the fact that he was gay and the fact that he was a heroin user really impacted his life largely. And he spent quite a few years living in Morocco. Morocco sort of didn't care about homosexuality or drug use. And he lived there for quite a few years. Mostly in his 20s to 40, age. Maybe, he might not even have been 40 by the time he came back. And then he was involved with the Beat Generation and all those sort of things. As I said, and a guy who led a spectacularly interesting life. He sort of lived that bohemian lifestyle really his whole life. And, although, granted, his lifestyle wouldn't be for everyone, it is fascinating to look at. And this is what we're listening to behind me is the soundtrack to the movie Naked Lunch that came out in '91 by, I think it was done by David Cronenberg. And the soundtrack is by Ornette Coleman and Howard, Howard Shore. Two heavyweights in the jazz world. And, just a very interesting man. Like I said, his lifestyle, I'm sure many people would find extremely difficult to understand, let alone embrace. But interesting. Living the kind of life that most people could never even imagine. And, he always seemed to survive. And he always seemed to contribute. He was one of those long-term drug users. Kind of like a Ray Charles. he managed to maintain his addiction for years and years and years without overdosing, without killing himself. And, you know, that's kind of a rarity amongst itself. You know, how many people do that? I mean, everybody knows somebody that's died of drug use. And, you know, the fact that he was able to just walk that line for years, pretty amazing. And he did clean up in his adult years periodically, but I think he always sort of went back to it at some point. I think that's an amazingly difficult addiction to try to get rid of. But the addiction sort of did plague him throughout his whole life. And he was just, you know, and he always kept contributing. Towards the end of his life, he moved out to a city called Lawrence, Kansas, which was sort of an, for some reason, it attracted artists. I think there were artists there before Burroughs arrived, but, you know, he was sort of the big kid on the block, as it were. And if you've ever seen any of Burroughs's, what they called the shotgun paintings, where he would shoot paint out of a shotgun at a canvas, his shotgun paintings were all done in Lawrence, Kansas, when he was in his 70s and into his 80s, you know, up until the time he passed away. And you know, he was just out there. You know, he was quieter in his old age. But you know, she's really an interesting guy. Like I said, I've never read his novels. I was fascinated by the man. I was fascinated by the legend of Burroughs, and by the way that he lived his life. You know, always an artist, always doing, always writing. You know, just a really interesting guy. Now, this Naked Lunch was very highly panned, especially here in America. You know, homosexuality and drug use, not exactly the kind of thing that's going to be on the high school reading list for the English lit students. You know, it was very rejected by the mainstream in America. And as I said, I never read it myself, so I'm not going to comment on it. I do know that the movie, the Naked Lunch film, encompassed the things in the book, and also put in things from his life. So the book had a little bit of, I think Naked Lunch was a bit biographical from everything that I've heard about it. So that they put in more of the biographical stuff into the film. And it's a very interesting watch. If you get the chance, I would certainly try to partake of it, if you can. And, well, anyway, I just wanted to just stop by and just, you know, I've always found Burroughs to be very interesting. And this movie is out there if you'd like to go see it. It came out in '91. It's not like it's a 60 years old. It's a fairly recent film. I think it actually came out about 30 years after the novel came out. I guess maybe, and the movie really didn't. The movie did not do well. You know, again, suffering from the same predisposed notions that the novel suffered from, and probably rightfully so. I mean, you know, the novel was what it was. So was the movie. It was about William S. Burroughs. And this is not a guy who was just one of the usual. But anyway, if this excited you at all, go check out The Naked Lunch film by David Cronenberg. Came out in 91. And it has this very interesting jazz score written by Ornette Coleman and Howard Shore. And, maybe you can have a look into what made the Beat Generation tick. Because Burroughs was a major contributor to that Beat Generation. And I think in counterculture as a whole throughout his entire life. So if any of this sounds interesting, by all means have a check out. And I'll try to put the link down in the bottom for the soundtrack album. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you all soon back up on the boardwalk. Be good, YouTube.